So generally this speech is aimed towards younger people of my own age, since we have an older generation, and I'm so blessed to have an older generation in the crowd. I'm going to rename the speech from why a young person should do psychedelics to why you should tell your kids to do psychedelics. And the story goes that when you're born, you're given a name, and when you go on and you grow up, you are given a personality. If you were to walk down the street and meet a new kid from down the street, and you were influenced by this kid, your mother would say to you, "That's not a way to act. That's not who you are. You're my child, not Mary's child from down the street. I've given you a personality and you should act upon these standards." So you're given a code of morality. Then you go on to school, and when you go on to school, you're kind of given a role which you're supposed to play in the world. You have a duty to pull your weight within society, and you have a job in which you have to find. And you go and get your job, and you march your way up the ladder of society through a career, and all the while you're chasing this pinnacle, this plateau. It could be a nice family with a nice house, it could be wealth, it could be an abundance of things. Either way, the whole time you've been told that you're supposed to do these things, that it's the social norm, and there's no real self which is telling you to do these things. You're just a mechanical object which is acting in accordance to everybody else. There's no real time between the time of birth to going into school to getting a job where you have self-inquiry to say that I am the one who wants these things. I am the one who is desiring to reach this plateau in life. So when you get to the point where you can have a self-inquiry, there's an ego which is blocking you, which is defending you, because you've been given all this knowledge throughout your entirety of your life, and the ego defends it and says, this is worthwhile, everyone else is doing it, I should do it. But the psychedelic drug comes in and it takes away that wall and it goes straight behind it, and you're forced into a place of self-inquiry. You have to discover yourself, and you have to know why it is that you want to do these things. And people generally go into a state of insanity if they do enough of it. They go out of the mind and they go deeper into the subconscious, or they go deeper into their heart, the heart consciousness, and the insanity arises because they're not sure where to go, if they don't find anywhere to go. So the second part of the speech is how to do psychedelics. And the way to do psychedelics, LSD or magic mushrooms, the extreme ones, is to base your train of thought not in a chaotic state of mind, but integrate it with Eastern theology. So these people have been working they've been working for the last 5,000 years of how to discover the self, how to go beyond the ego and go from the state of nothingness to beyond. But in Western theology, there's a place where we're told what to do, because there is a God, Christian, Catholic, Muslim God, which tells us how we ought to be. But there's no person that's representing that. They're just a result of someone else, your mother, the God telling you what to do. So when you come back inside and you do the psychedelic drug, you're not stuck in a state of limbo and insanity. You have guidebooks which have been written for thousands upon thousands of years, which will give you a guidance through the self-inquiry process, so you can meditate on your mind, meditate on yourself, and then do yogas and go back into the world and become someone from your own desires, not from someone else's desires who's telling you this place that you ought to be going to because everyone else is doing it and it's the social norm. So the reason you should tell your kids to do psychedelic drugs is because they will not be a product of society. They will not be doing it because everyone says, you ought to be pulling your weight. You ought to be doing it because it's the thing to do. They are doing it because they are individuals. They're doing it because they themselves want to do it. And it doesn't matter as you as a parent don't get the result you want out of a child. I think what you're getting is someone who is creating their own existence. And I think that's the whole point of the human experience, to create your own existence, become as far out to the person you can possibly be, live on the brink of culture and perpetuate culture and become an inventor of your society.
You said about the young people doing this. Now, what is wrong with the old people doing it?
Well, old people can do it too. The point that I was making was there's a point between you when you develop your personality, you reach high school, and when you leave high school, you're forced out into the world, and there's this time period where you kind of have to rush into university, rush into a job, and there's no time for self-inquiry. I would think that a person in their 50s or 60s or 40s, however old you are, they've kind of already gone to that point of self-inquiry and they're quite certain of who they are. The problem is that in our society, when they're forced into this role of university or career, they get to the age of 40 or 50 and they reach a midlife crisis where they say, well, I've reached this plateau, I've got everything, I've got the wealth, the family, but it's not all that I wanted it to be. They kind of realize that they've raced their way all through life to reach this pinnacle, but the whole point of life was to dance. It was a theatre. You're supposed to enjoy it the whole way through instead of just aiming for the future. And that's why it's more important for a younger person than an older person to do it. But I don't have prejudice. An older person should be always developing their mind and self-inquiring. I hope I'm doing it when I'm 60 and 70, and I'm a healthy magic mushroom eater by the time I'm a pensioner.
With the question of psychedelic substances, do you think the individual should go it alone without actually, or even worse than that, at the suggestion of some of his mates, into self-medicating without actually having some other person with them who's capable of being looking after him at the same time?
Good question. There's an agenda with psychedelics to say that you should have someone with you in case you end up killing yourself, in case you go into some sort of madness. And I guess the answer to that question is up to the individual. I can only speak from my personal experience, where I like to do the psychedelic drug in a state of silent darkness. Most people do it within a city environment where they go out and they think this is a crazy experience. I'm going to go out and look at the city lights and go out dancing. But I think that's quite an insane way to do it because you're accustomed to all the influences that are coming into your face. I think the traditional way to do it, the way they do it in South America, is like I was saying with the self-inquiry, where you do it in a state where you are alone. But you should have some kind of a guideline to guide you through that experience. If you have someone with you, the rule should be that they don't influence you in any way. They're just sitting there kind of like a shadow. And if there is some real danger, in the same way as the psychologist is treating a human being, they will talk to some kind of professional if they choose to hurt someone else, they're looking to be a murderer, or if they're going to self-harm themselves. Then the psychiatrist acts upon the individual. But the role of the psychiatrist the whole time is to just sit there and be a kind of medium so the person can display their individual, can display what is hiding within them. So to answer your question, yes, you can have someone there, but they shouldn't be of any influence. They should just be a shadow.
Okay, but what happens if the person is also taking the psychedelic things with you? Can't they trip with you?
Right. What happens if the other person in the room is taking psychedelics with him? Well, I guess you'd have to be a little bit more advanced. I wouldn't advise it for well, you could do it for a first time, but you'd have to trust that person. They'd have to be a good friend who you can count on. It wouldn't be a stranger, someone that you've just met. They could be anyone who can put any kind of thought into your head if that's the case. So if you're going to do it with someone else in psychedelics, make sure they're a good friend or a good guru, someone you can rely on.